everyone, welcome back to another episode of Crazy 4. The next few videos will be part of a series where I interview successful individuals for us to learn about the reasons behind their success. Hello, I'm Manya. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm here with Mr. Dan NEARY, who is the Vice President of Asia Pacific for Meta, also known as Facebook. He has had an amazing career and has been kind enough to share a bit of his own journey and advice for young people entering or aspiring to enter the tech field. So welcome, Mr. Dan, and I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this interview with me.
My pleasure. You're the one of the few people that call me Mr. Dan, so I'll take it.
Okay. So as a starter, you have a fancy title, but what does that actually mean? What do you do at Meta?
Yeah. Look, I mean, if you think about Meta at a very simplistic way, in fact, a lot of the tech companies, you typically have teams that work on the technology, so the various platforms or tech side of the house. And then you have those that work on the business side. And so I work on the business side. I lead the business groups across Asia Pacific. And so what I do is I spend my time externally with companies and businesses on how they might want to use either Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp or Messenger to build their own business or find new users.
Got it. So you've had an impressive background at Meta, but could you also take us to your entire career journey from even before Meta?
Yeah, look, you're going to need a pull up a chair on this one. So I'm a little bit older, so I've got a long journey. But look, I'll try and do it in a really succinct way. My background, I'm originally from Chicago. I grew up middle class family, raised by a mother who was a school teacher. My first job was with the Kellogg cereal company, and I was in the marketing department of Kellogg's in the as my first gig. Look, after a couple of years there, they came and they asked me if I would be open to taking a temporary short-term overseas assignment to go launch Kellogg cereal in Korea, which at that time would have been the first country that they would launch in. And so, look, it was, truth be told, it wasn't a very desirable job. Nobody else wanted to do it. I was single at the time, so they probably figured I didn't have any attachments and was open to going somewhere else for a brief stint. And one of the things that they promised me is they said, look, go do this, get in, hire some people and train them up, and then come back. We'll give you a promotion. Life will be good. And so I accepted it. And, that turned out to be, I think, one of the more pivotal moments in my life and, shaped many aspects to come. And I say for several reasons. One, first off, I loved Asia, the diversity, the food, the working across cultures. It was just a love affair. And, I've spent the majority of my life, in retrospect, I've spent the majority of my life here in Asia. The second thing is, I ultimately developed a skill as the start guy. And so, I learned that, there's kind of these traditional tracks in whatever function you're in, marketing or company wise, but there's also, these individuals to develop something that is a bit more unique. And so I became the startup guy for the Kellogg company. And I went across Asia from country to country and, launched breakfast cereal, late 80s, early 90s, across most of Asia, which was, I think, pretty darn cool. And, it played itself out, frankly, over the rest of my life. The third thing that I would say about that decision is, it was a real career accelerator. And so I was able, with a set of unique skills, to take on responsibility that were beyond my years. I think when I left, I was at Kellogg's for about 8 years. When I left, I was running a manufacturing facility and an export business based in Guangzhou, China. So I was in my late 20s, and so that was that whole taking on something different and unique skill set turned out to be a pretty good career accelerator. I then realized that as one of the things that I really loved from that experience were the startup aspects of it. And so I went from doing a startup for a big company to doing a startup for myself. So I moved back to Chicago, did a startup acquiring and scaling expositions. It's a whole story as to how I got into that, which I won't go through. But that proved to be pretty cool, and even more cool, it got bought out by publishers. So this is the 1997, 1998 time period, and this is I just had a business that was bought out, and the internet was really starting to pick up in a pretty significant way. And being a marketer, I just fell in love with the internet right out of the gates. I know you probably can't think of life without the internet, but most of my early life was without the internet. But look, I fell in love with it. The ability to market to the masses, or connect and develop a business from a digital standpoint, was revolutionary. And if anything, I got that part of things. I might not be the quickest person, but that one I was on right away. So look, I wanted to be part of it, so I ended up moving to Silicon Valley. That's where the action was. And I ended up doing a startup. I was a COO of a company called Auction Watch, which had all of the attributes of kind of the early internet stories of the big boom, and it was a pretty awesome experience. And then came along the dot-com bust, and so I was part of that. The company started to go down. Eventually, Alibaba bought the company, but I ended up moving over to eBay, which was still in kind of the early stages of its development. I did a variety of roles over at eBay, but ultimately made my way back to a little bit of my specialty, which was running internet emerging markets. And so we had done an acquisition in India called Bob. And I took over that acquisition and integrated it into the company and ramped it up, and spent a fair bit of time in India doing that. Ultimately, I moved over to Singapore and ran a large portion of Asia Pacific out of Singapore. Move along that way, you go through a period of boom and bust. And along comes 2007 and another financial crisis, a little bit of a downturn. A lot of companies started to divest many of the different kind of non-core businesses that they were involved in. eBay used to own a company called Skype, and they decided to spin that off to a private equity company. And they asked me if I wanted to go run Asia Pacific for that, and I did it. And that proved to be another awesome experience. Ramped that up with private equity ownership for a couple of years. Microsoft ultimately bought that. We were in the process of taking it public. I stayed on at Microsoft for a year to transition it. And right as I was starting to finish up, I get the call that Facebook, previous to Meta, Facebook was looking for somebody to lead Asia Pacific on the business side. And it's like getting a call from the Yankees. I said, yes, I am in. And a decade later, here I am. And it's been a journey that I am incredibly grateful for.
Yeah, that's quite a long and impressive journey. So throughout this journey, what is something that kept you motivated to go to work and continue in this field since you've been in it for a while?
Yeah, look, I think I'm not naive in the sense that there are good days and bad days for, the job, for the company, for the individual. But, by and large, man, I just absolutely love my job. I think I am in one of the best jobs in the world, at least for me. I work at a company that is having a tremendous amount of impact in the world. Nearly half the people in the world are active across one of the Meta platforms. And I'm working in a region that I love. I work with a ton of smart people. And I help businesses be successful. I've got a passion for that. So I think that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, fair enough. So are there any particular traits that you would say have made you successful?
So look, I think, the number one factor for success is with all of those things that you read is good luck and fortune. So look, and that's my career makes an incredible amount of sense when I look back in retrospect. But when you're going through it, it's not always obvious. And so, look, I had a lot of good luck and fortune along the way. There are certainly some traits that I would, advise people to emphasize, or at least work for me. I've surrounded myself with some incredibly smart people. And when I say surrounded myself, I worked for some people that are just amazing. And I've had people that work for me that are far more capable than I will ever be. And I think, that's offered me the opportunity to learn in my career and learn in life. And so, I would say that ability to be around smart people is an awesome one. Another one is, I would say, do new things. So be around smart people, do new things, which is kind of the formula for learning. I also like to think that I have done a good job in nurturing others. And so when I look at a lot of the people that I've worked with, I've helped people in their career go on to do, work for other companies and do amazing things. And it's fascinating as I get older, how many of those connections I still have in my life. And I'm so grateful that I was able to help influence others, and others were able to influence me. And
Mhm.
I've been able to develop those connections and that trust as I've gone through life. The last thing that I would say is that I think I have been really open to new experiences.
Mhm.
And if I just think back to when I went through school, you're taught by either your parents or school or society. You can be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, an accountant, and all those are great, awesome. But I think what they don't teach you is that I think some of the best opportunities, at least my perspective, are outside of that. And in fact, there's a stat which I'm sure I'm screwing up, but directionally I'm correct. There's the stat is that if you look at kids that are in school today, 60% of them, over 60% of them, are going to go on to do jobs that don't exist today. And so I think that is scary, but I also think that that is wonderfully exciting. And, look, I've lived a little bit of that in my life. I took a number of different experiences that, frankly, I didn't know how they'd work out. And they turned out to be, life defining.
Mhm. Surprisingly, like many of the other individuals I've talked to, given like almost the exact same advice of like surrounding yourself with smart people and learning and teaching. Yeah, but anyways, surely over this long journey of beautiful experiences, you've had some challenges along the way. Could you share a few and explain how you overcame them?
Yeah, look, first off, I'm in tech. So tech, the hallmark of tech is disruption and change. And so, I think you need to be okay with that if you choose that as a profession. I've chosen it not only as a profession, I've chosen it in life in many respects. And so, look, I think that's been both an attribute for my career, but it's also, it's been a big challenge. You're working on something that you think is the right path, and suddenly things change.
Mhm.
And it's the study of business is quite fascinating in that regard. And I mean, think about if you were a car manufacturer. So let's say, your Honda. You'd probably get up every day and think about your competition being other car companies. And
Mhm.
then suddenly, if you think about the world changing, then suddenly the comes, Grab and Uber and some of the other ride sharing programs and or platforms, and suddenly people aren't buying cars. It's really transportation. When I grew up, it was a car was freedom. It was my identity, and now it moves to something completely different and serviced in a different way. And then along comes electric vehicles, which changes the whole paradigm again. So look, I just think, that's a bit of a metaphor, but I just think there's so much disruption that's going on in the world, and it's not just tech. You've got to be aware of what's going on in your job, in your field, and in the world. And how do you keep up with the latest and greatest and continue to reinvent yourself? And so, that's been a disruption and a challenge along the way. But it's also, I like to think that I do it fairly well. So it's proved to be an asset. I think the other one that I would kind of put out there is just working across different cultures as a challenge. It is when you grow up in the U.S. like I did in the early stages, you have kind of a very defined way to to view problems, to solve problems, to evaluate success. And I just think when you start working across multiple cultures, all of those paradigms get blown apart. And so that's also been a big challenge. And look, there's a lot of time that I've invested in listening and understanding and surrounding myself with different cultures that I think has helped me with that along the way. And again, this is another one of those things where, if you think about your challenges in life, if you make your way through it, oftentimes that ends up as an asset. And so I think my ability, as an example, to work across cultures, while a challenge initially, is now, probably one of my greatest assets.
Yeah. So the fact that you're from the US and have lived the majority of your life in Asia, have you faced any issues due to your identity or with your identity?
Yeah, and look, I know this is personal for different people and how they do with it, but I struggle a lot with trying to fit myself into the round hole that is that I grew up actually Irish. I grew up in the US. I've lived in a lot of different countries in Asia, and so it took me a while to get comfortable with the fact that I don't fully fit in anywhere. I'm a square peg. And so I think over time I've gotten a lot more comfortable with that. And in fact, recently made the decision to actually convert and become Singaporean. And so, that was a big thing on my identity side, because, I had to balance an American from the US, but yet I've spent the majority of my life, 20 plus years, just in Singapore. This is my friend's family, my immediate family. This is my community. And so, how I define my identity has really shifted over the years. And I recognize that even though now I'm technically Singaporean, I'm not native. And so I don't really fit in here either perfectly. And so I love the values of the country. I love, again, the culture, the people, the food. So I think for me, on the identity side, I've tried to get comfortable with the fact that I'll never fit in anywhere. And I surround myself with a lot of other, square pegs that feel comfortable with the same.
Congrats on the red passport, and good thing that you've come to a conclusion with it. Um, Moving on, if you had any pieces of advice for students like me or other students, what would it be?
I'd have. I think one of the definitions of getting old is it feels like I have so much advice. If only somebody would listen. So I'm happy to do this video. Look, number one, it would be is realize how much time you actually have. And what I mean by that is, there's a certain rush. If I go back to when I was in my teens and my 20s, there was a certain rush to get from A to B to C to D, and I'm going to be at the class reunion, and I better be a vice president by then, and I better have the house and a picket fence, and I just think that the context of age, you realize that it's just not that way, and in fact, it's a real missed opportunity if you don't take the early stages of your life, which are the 20s, the 30s, frankly, even going into the 40s, I would decide maybe that's a sign I'm getting old, but even the early stages of the 40s, I would say you're still in the early innings, but is make really good use of trying different things. I look at what the reasons why I love my job, it's because I found the right niche for me. And so, I encourage people, take some risks. If things don't work out, too bad, do something else. It's not a life ender. And so, understand that you're still early stage and take a lot of risks to find what you really enjoy would be number one. Number two is, I think I would be very deliberate in defining success. And if I look back to my early stage, my definition of success would be I enter a big company, I go from A to B to C to D, and so on and so forth. And eventually I'm CEO of that company. And I can't think of a worse definition of success, frankly, than that. I look at success much more holistically, and how am I as a father? How am I as a husband? Am I enjoying myself? What do I think about with my friends? How's my tennis game? And so, look, I think be very careful about how you define success, because depending on how you do it, that's what you're going to optimize for. And if it's only about money, or it's only about a title, I think there's a real danger there that you're giving up the rest of the world that, I think is what makes life so special. Kind of the last piece of advice I would say is, look, be deliberate about your career and be open to different opportunities. Again, harken back to my own career where I made some decisions to do some different things early on, and they became life defining. But I also think that treating your career deliberately and investing in that is just a really smart move. Don't let the stream of life take you to some place that you wake up in your 50s and you're like, how did I get? Take ownership of it, foster it, do some awesome things, and enjoy the run.
That's all I can say is thank you. That's great advice. Okay. So for the last question, I was wondering, since the majority of technology is male dominated, are there any techniques that you know that have encouraged female participation or can in the future?
Yeah, look, I'm certainly in the tech environment where that is oftentimes, or for many companies, challenging. The way I look at it is, look, if I look at the lens of the business that we do, so things like Facebook and Instagram, half the world's population are active across the platforms, and that includes community groups of all different shapes and sizes. And so the only way that, frankly, we'll be successful as a company, I believe, is, if that same diversity externally is also represented internally. And that goes for gender, it goes for race, it goes for religion. Specific on gender and females in tech, I really try and be an ally and be intentional about it. And so as somebody that is a leader in the company, the more that I talk about this is something that I value. I talk more about the way that we hire, the way that we promote, and the way that we operate, making sure that all the voices in the room are represented. I think all of those things are techniques that help with diversity, and specifically on some of the gender challenges.
That makes sense. Thank you so much. We can wrap it up on that note. And once again, thank you for taking time out of your day to take this interview with me. I
My
look,
pleasure.
of course, I look forward to using this advice and sharing it with the youth that watches my YouTube channel. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Thank you, Manya. Bye-bye.
Bye.